Take two. This is the Newbery Chronicles, not the Newbery Files, as I said in a recent alleged audio recording. But anyway, this is a podcast in which two people read through all the Newbery Medal winners, and then we talk about it. I'm Michael.
And I'm Rebecca.
And this time we are tired.
And a bit grumpy.
It's just been a long day with terrible children. Excuse me, children acting terribly. Got to do person first language.
And we're not going to say which children, whether it was your school children or your own children.
My school children were adequate today.
All right.
I will say which children.
Okay.
But at any rate, today on this day, we are reading the 1936 novel Roller Skates, which won the 1937 medal, and it's by Ruth Sawyer. And before we start, don't forget you can leave us feedback, like my diligent, loving mother always does, at newberrychronicles@gmail.com. And we'll actually respond to your message if you do that. Thus far, only my mother and father have gotten responses. But you too could get a personalized email from one of us. Yeah. I guess I'll go ahead and tune into the audio. What am I saying?
I don't know what you're saying.
I will pivot to the author's bio. I think I was saying author's bio, but combined all those words together into audio.
I see.
Okay. At any rate, Ruth Sawyer is a really accomplished person. Like, I feel like we're frequently saying, I need to stop being surprised that Newbery Medal winners are like, really accomplished people. But this woman is very accomplished. So she was born in Boston in 1880 to a family that sounds very rich. They always say that she was in a well-to-do family, but like based on her life, it sounds like this is she's like constantly traveling to Europe and like doing stuff like that. They have a summer cottage in Maine where they allegedly live off the land, which sounds like that they have a servant bring them like caviar every day or something. At any rate, they were rich enough to have live-in help. And because it was the 1880s in New York, they had Irish help. And she had an Irish nanny, Ruth did, named Joanna, who apparently was a great storyteller. And that's where she learned how to love stories and basically dedicated her whole life to stories. She more or less became a folklorist throughout her life. She went to Columbia and studied folklore and storytelling. And a lot of her life is spent traveling around, like studying, like mythology and folklore, almost like you hear about like Zora Neale Hurston or people like that doing. And so she went to all sorts of places like Australia and Ireland, and Wikipedia compared her to the Brothers Grimm in that regard. Like, so she's like a for real like anthropologist, folklorist. But also a really accomplished author of fiction as well. She wrote a lot of stories and books, and for both adults and children, she was really successful in this regard, especially with children. She won a Laura Ingalls Wilder Award. Is that the name of the full title of the award? Laura Ingalls Wilder Award in 1965. Because she had a really full life of children's writing as well as folklore studies. Her first book, which is called This Way to Christmas, which she published in 1915, which, by the way, she was only 35 at that point. So, still hope for us, Rebecca.
There is. We
could run for president and publish a book. This feels like the archetypal Ruth Sawyer book, in which there's a boy and his parents go on a trip and they leave him alone, not alone, but they leave him without family with an Irish couple. And one of them is named Joanna. And so like this book is lightly autobiographic. It's also apparently based on her son. And it also is emphasizing travel. It's also emphasizing the freedom of children, which she was apparently a huge proponent of, like children being liberated to kind of follow their whims. And as far as I can tell, a lot of her stories are about that, including roller skates. And so maybe, Rebecca, you want to tell us about this novel, Roller Skates.
Yeah, and while she did believe that, she did not have a lot of liberation and freedom in her childhood. So, Roller Skates is a fictional autobiographical story about a child named
Lucinda, right?
Lucinda Wyman, whose parents are leaving for the summer, and so she goes to the home of the Mrs. Peters. There are two sisters that have this home in New York City, and they're going to care for her. Oh, it's during a year, not a summer, that her parents go to Italy. And this book is really just about Lucinda, and, Miss Peters, the Mrs. Peters are very hands-off. As long as she tells them where she's going, she can kind of go wherever she wants in the city and make whatever friends she wants to make. But her parents were very strict, and the advice they gave her was discipline her often.
Apparently her aunt was very strict too, because she was almost going to stay with her aunt, and she didn't.
Aunt Emily. She does go to Aunt Emily's house several times in the book, and it's always just very cold there, very strict. Lucinda can't do anything right. She says her Aunt Emily tells her she's as homely as two toads. I don't know why just not one toad, but...
I don't know. Her uncle's pretty cool, though. Is it Uncle Earl?
Yes, Uncle Earl. She gets really close with him, and he introduces her to Shakespeare and takes her out to plays and inspires her so much that she decides to put on a production of The Tempest,
which I have questions
puppets.
with. He talks about reading The Tempest to her
in a night.
Yeah. Like, this has got to be some Reader's Digest nonsense.
Maybe it's like what our friend Andrew was talking about how Shakespeare would always excerpt his performances. Maybe Uncle Earl did that too.
Perhaps.
With Lucinda. But some other friends that she makes along the way is Mr. Gillian, the handsome cab driver. Not the handsome cab driver.
He could be handsome.
He might,
we
but
don't
it's
know.
handsome, which I don't even know what that means. But that's what he's...
That's the kind of... Isn't that kind of cab? And the only reason I know that word is in one of the Chronicles of Narnia books. There's that guy who gets taken to Narnia, and he's like a cab driver, and they say he's like the handsome driver.
I gotcha. Regardless, she also befriends a police officer, Patrolman McGonagall. She makes friends with this boy that's her same age, Tony Capino, who runs a fruit stand with his dad, and he and Lucinda really get close when Lucinda helps him take down these bullies that keep knocking over the stand and stealing fruit from them. They also make friends with a rag and bone man, which is somebody that collects rags and other things from households that aren't wanted and tries to sell them for money.
There's a good White Stripes song about rag and bone.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, if we were professional, we'd play a little clip of that here.
Yeah, and get copyrighted by Jack White and Third Man Records.
We won't do that. So there's just a lot that happens in this book. Two of her very close friends die.
Shockingly.
Spoilers,
by the way.
One is murdered, and Lucinda walks in on it.
She's just got like a knife in her back.
Yeah, it's absurd, like completely bizarre. And then another one that is also very tragic but makes more sense is there's a little girl that Lucinda has befriended that lives in her building. She and her family are very poor. Her name is Trinket because she's the little trinket of her parents. She's their treasure, their pride and joy. And Lucinda befriends her and introduces her to toys and experiences she would never have. But unfortunately, Trinket falls ill toward the end of the novel and dies.
It's like the classic, like, she's got a cough, and you immediately realize it's going to be fatal.
Exactly. It is just like that. And the book ends with Lucinda's parents are coming back, and she's just really sad that she can't stay 10 forever. And that's kind of the end. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this book in between, but that's kind of just an overall summary.
I feel like we say this about a lot of books, but it's very episodic.
It is very episodic.
I've realized reading this that there's like a particular subgenre of children's book that A, Rebecca, you don't seem to like very much, but B, the Newbery Committee seems to really like, which is the semi-autobiographical novel that is realistic, largely kind of comic, but occasionally very serious, set in a historical time period, and yeah, has no like overarching like cause and effect plot. Is mostly incident.
Right. So what did you like about this book?
Well, first of all, I was just reflecting on. Doesn't that sound nice? You drop your kid off with more or less a stranger, and you go to Italy for a year.
Okay, you're just saying this because we've had a rough night with our children.
That is,
a year is a really long time.
Well, it wouldn't have to be a year. We could go 6 months.
Okay.
But doesn't that sound nice? I wish I were an upper crust New Yorker in the 1800s.
But you know what doesn't sound nice is our kids hating us so much that they can't wait for us to leave and being sad when we come back after a year.
That's true.
That doesn't sound so nice.
That's true, but at least we would have been to Italy.
So let's talk about what you liked about this book.
Okay, so the things I liked about this book are like a lot of books like this, where there's some parts that are pretty good and there are other parts that are kind of boring. And then, unlike most books that I've read, a few parts that are just incongruously dark.
Oh my gosh.
So I liked some of the things that they do. I like that she puts on the play. That's fun. Even though I had a hard time keeping track of who was who because she meets a lot of people, I like the idea of her just like roaming around meeting people, and she builds this little community. It's very sweet. It's I don't know, like I like that she gets Tony to quit being bullied. Like that's a fun little like incident where she more or less like bribes a cop to stand around so that the bullies don't come again. And I don't know, I thought it's kind of fun. Like she's kind of a fun protagonist. Like I don't know how much of this book is based in reality beyond the premise, but like I can imagine this being like a wish fulfillment version of Ruth Sawyer's life, where she's just kind of like, what's the word? She's almost like
a big thing I left out. Yes, but hang on. A big thing I left out is why it's called roller skates. Is that she's going just around New York on her roller skates everywhere. Sorry.
It was the 1890s. I don't think they had the subway yet, so.
Well, it
was a dark time for New Yorkers.
That is a very big part of the book. And anytime she goes to Aunt Emily's, she's not allowed to bring her skates.
Yeah, it's funny. It is a big part of the book, but it's also like a very mundane part of the book. Like it's not like any plot happens because of the roller skates or anything. She just simply is wearing the roller skates a lot of times. Anyway, I don't feel like I have very many profound things to say about like why I liked the things that I liked about this book. I just found like certain parts of it kind of quaint and charming and fun and kind of cozy. You know, like she's it gets to be. This is not like this movie at all, but it gets to be kind of like at the end of Groundhog Day, you know, when Bill Murray has been in that town living the same day over and over again, and he is able to like have known all these people and their routines, and like there's like that one scene where he's taking Andy McDowell around, and he's just like, and here's this guy, he taught me piano, and like here's this guy, he always dies and I can't stop him from dying, and like it's just like a whole thing of like, look at all my friends that I've made and all the life I've lived. And like, it's a little bit like that, where like you are slowly like accumulating these kind of characters in the periphery of her life until by the end, she's just like roaming around like she does a thing where she's like invited to too many Thanksgivings. And so she's got to like go to different people's Thanksgivings. And then she's like, well, I can't make it to your Thanksgiving, but I'll be around for leftovers on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's not a profound novel, I didn't think. It's not a novel that I'm going to like, you know, really feverishly recommend to people, but like I found it kind of cozy. Also, I will say that like when Trinket dies, it is genuinely sad. Mm-hmm. Like it's not, you know, for as much as like she is this character who is basically invented to die, like so many children are in children's literature, it doesn't seem like, I don't know, when you can see it coming a mile away that she's gonna die. Like she's just a sweet innocent child who serves no purpose except to have a cough, and then you're like, well, she's a goner, but I don't know, when she actually dies, it is kind of sad, and like so much of this book is episodic, and it's like one thing happens in a chapter and we move on and we don't really hear about it again, including the murder, and which I assume we'll talk about in a minute, but. like that is actually something that lingers through to the end of the book. Like that's like the last major thing that happens in the book before her parents come home. And the book kind of ends really bittersweetly with her like reflecting over like all the things that she's done and all the people she's met while her parents have been gone, but also like mourning her friend's death. And there's like this dream that she has because there's this like metaphor that she talks through with is it the cab driver?
No, it's the doctor.
Oh, the doctor, that's right. Yeah, that's actually a really good scene
I think so too.
with her and the doctor, because the doctor,
This is after Trinket has died.
but the doctor can't
Lucinda
bring
doesn't
himself
know yet.
to tell her
Yeah.
that she's died, and so they're like talking about birds and flying and stuff, and it becomes a metaphor for death. And then she has dreams about being a seagull. Anyway, I thought I don't know. I thought those parts were nice and good. Did you like anything about this book, Rebecca?
I did. I liked the setting. I really liked it being in New York in the 1890s. And you hear, I assume when they talked about the part that they were talking about Central Park. Because they were talking about, there was this one part where they were talking about, I'm so glad that everyone got signatures to make sure the park didn't become a racetrack or something like that, was what the park was going to become. And like the city had put up this fight. I should have looked at the history of Central Park and seen if that happened. But so that was really cool. Just
lots
kind
of Irish representation.
Yes, but just seeing like they talked about MoMA in the book, and they talked about the Museum of Natural History, and just other things.
Wait, I don't remember them talking about those things.
Mm-hmm. Because Tony goes to the museum, or maybe it was MoMA is
Museum of Modern Art.
They talked about him going to. Maybe it wasn't MoMA, but they talked about him. It was the Metropolitan Museum.
Okay.
So anyway, I liked the setting. I liked it being set in New York in the 1890s, where some things were familiar. And anyway, I liked that. I liked the concept of this child just being able to make friends with whomever she pleases. I really liked the juxtaposition of Aunt Emily to the Mrs. Peters, just their different styles and that comparison there. And my favorite scene was also the one you were just talking about with the doctor talking to Lucinda about Trinket's life being like that of a seagull, and Lucinda sees a seagull, and then she later dreams that she is a seagull with Trinket. I thought all of that was really beautiful. And I think that was the best part of the book. Unfortunately, it's at the end.
Yeah, that's true. The Museum of Modern Art did not come together until 1929. So.
But it was a different museum. Sorry.
Yeah, unless Ruth Sawyer's really bad at their history.
I don't think so. I think I just misunderstood which museum we were talking about.
A museum. Speaking of which, not of the museum, but of that being the end of the things you liked. What didn't you like about this book, Rebecca?
Wasn't it your turn to do that?
I just was going to segue smoothly into what you didn't like, but the smooth segue is gone. So
no, I'll do it. I think this book was kind of boring overall. This is a book like many that I love, one that is episodic and has lively characters, like Anne of Green Gables especially is a similar book.
This is a lot like Anne of Green Gables. She keeps saying that she's in an orphanage.
Hang on. I'm going to say why.
Sorry.
It's not the same. But yes, it is very similar. But I love that book. Also, I think the style is kind of similar to Dead End in Norvell, where these really all kinds of characters with all these different stories. But none of these characters in the book are as vibrant as I wanted them to be, and the individual stories don't really build on the other ones in a way that there's any kind of through-line plot, which I think is very different in both Anne of Green Gables and Dead End in Norvell. Most of those stories that need to come together do, and the other ones that don't really serve to build up the character development of the individual people. And this book just doesn't do that for me. So I also just the whole scene. Okay, here's the other thing that I couldn't quite put my finger on. There's a lot of different races and ethnicities of people in this book from different social classes, different cultures. It all seemed very tokenizing to me.
That was going to be one of the things I didn't like.
So that is tricky.
I
also, it is very racist toward Black people. Like, people are literally called Black Susan and Black whoever because they're just servants. So,
Right.
and she makes friends with no Black people.
That is true. Like, there is like an element of like she says that she's an orphan because her parents are gone, but she's clearly living this charmed life.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a little bit of like tourism on her part of
Yes.
like going through all these other people's life, like Trinket and like all these things. And she's obviously nice and a bright part of their lives, but it does have the element of like, well, I'm just pretending to be on their level because I can afford to do that as a rich person with no consequences.
Right.
Basically.
Yes.
And
the whole scene with the murder. Okay, so
the
there's
murder.
this
Oh my God.
lady. Is she actually a princess?
No, she's just Turkish.
Okay, there's this Turkish woman that Lucinda finds very exotic,
she likes to imagine
and exciting,
her as a
and this
princess.
beautiful. And she's supposedly helping her learn English, and apparently she's with this guy that we know is like scary because Lucinda sees him and is scared. That's the only reason.
It's the classic adjective to describe a sinister man from a foreign country. He's a swarthy man.
Yes, I thought about that Malcolm Gladwell episode.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I learned this in grad school.
A revisionist history.
In my creative writing classes, they're like, never describe someone as swarthy.
Yes. So anyways, so you see this one scene of him and he scares Lucinda, so we know he's bad news. That's the only indication we have that he's bad news. And then one day Lucinda gets kicked out of school, and she stops by the princess's house. And for who knows what reason, she just decides, well, they're not answering the door, so it's unlocked, so I'm going to go in, which you already know. Like, the whole time you know something's going to be bad.
Well, because she's like trying to play a prank on them, like jump out and scare them or something like that, but then there's no response, so she's like, hello?
Well, and then she just the princess is dead with a dagger in her back. And
the first thing she realizes is this dagger used to be like displayed on the wall, and she's like, "Where's the dagger that's supposed to be on the wall?"
And so the implication is that this swarthy dude murdered her, and then the owner of the building says, "Well, we can't call the police yet because I'll have to tell them that you were the last you walked in on this. We'll just wait for the maid to come in and she can let me know that she's dead, and then we'll go to the police."
as if the child would be a murder suspect.
Yeah.
Like a 10-year-old.
And maybe this woman could have lived. Nobody goes and checks on her except
I assume
Lucinda.
that she's dead.
Yeah, but we don't. I'm just saying, like, this guy just took her word for it that this woman is dead. Well, I'll wait for the cleaning lady to come find her. I don't know. But the thing about that scene is it doesn't fit at all.
It doesn't.
With the rest of the book,
tone change.
And it never, they never really deal with it again. And literally the next chapter, we assume that Lucinda's had it worked out at school, that she's back at school, and I don't know. But it made me wonder, did this really happen to this woman?
It's such a strange thing to put in a book, and we know that it's at least partly based on her own life. I don't know. This feels like a thing that...
You know what I think happened? I think her editor read this book and said it's too boring. Spice it up a bit. And so she put this in there.
Oh, man.
That's what I think happened.
Perhaps. But yeah, I wondered that same thing is, did this really happen? Because otherwise it makes no sense. This woman, the quote-unquote princess, is in a handful of scenes. Not that much. And then she gets the most dramatic thing in the whole book happen to her.
Yeah.
And... I don't know. It doesn't scan well that she's also the only like quote unquote foreigner, unless you count all the Irish people
or the Italians,
who, like, for the record, are certainly like stereotyped in their own way.
Yes.
But
they have lots of babies. They're redheaded. They're Catholic.
Yeah, there's at least no like dialect though. That would have been a little embarrassing.
Oh no, it's the Irish that are redheaded. Never mind.
Well, of course, the Italians like have their own stuff going on. They're probably also Catholic. At any rate, I feel like I disliked a lot of the same stuff that you disliked. Maybe not to quite the degree, but I do agree that this book was boring for stretches. I 100% agree that the murder is just, it doesn't make sense. It's incongruous. It literally, you could take that chapter out of the book and nothing else would have to change about the book. Except maybe, like, you would have to make more references to this lady who is allegedly alive. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with all that. I had a hard time keeping all the characters straight. And I think part of that is because a lot of them are not very well drawn. Like they're
But they just pop out of nowhere. Like we're
there's a
supposed
lot
to know
of
they exist
yeah.
the whole
Sometimes
time.
there are ones that I'm like, has she even mentioned this person before, or is she just throwing a name
Like
in?
at Thanksgiving, there were all these people that came up at that point because they all wanted her over for dinner.
Yeah,
Like her godmother just pops up there, and that's how she
I
ends
kept
up
thinking
going
that
to
maybe
for
I
dinner.
wasn't being an attentive enough reader. But I'm glad you're saying
Also,
that.
here's another thing we left out. This book opens, like the framing device is that this story is being told by the narrator
forgot
based
about
on
this.
these diaries that Lucinda gave her at the end of the year or whatever. But we don't know who the narrator is.
I forgot
We never
about that, and it
find
never
out.
wraps back around.
Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't. Why is that even a framing device? Like,
you
just
know,
tell
you
the
know,
story.
some novels have like especially like 19th century novels, which I realize this is not that, but a lot of 19th century novels have like a pointless framing device to make it seem more realistic.
Oh, okay.
Like you know, like it'd be like, oh, I found this manuscript in this old house, and like, oh, it's this gothic story that's an
Yeah.
epistolary novel.
I
Like,
guess you're right.
it also does the thing where it blanks out the year. It'll be like, which I never understood why they did that, because like, who cares if it's 1885 or 1882
Yeah, it's
or
like
whatever?
it's redacted.
Yeah, like, but I think that's like older novels do that to like they're like operating under this like premise of like we're pretending like this is a real thing, and so they're like protecting the names of people. Or like, if have you ever read in the book? They don't do this with New York Cityans, but because that would be silly. But like, have you ever read a book where it's like, you know, I was living in, and then they'll put like the first initial of the of the
like
city,
all
and
the
then
Bronte
blank them
novels.
out. Like, I don't really understand why everyone knew these books were fake, but maybe it was just kind of cool. Maybe it's
I
like
don't
their
know.
mockumentary format
Yeah.
of the 19th century. But this book is from 1936,
I
so
know.
but maybe it's trying to be like that.
I don't know.
I had totally forgot about the framing device.
Well,
Drop the ball on that,
that's okay.
Ruth Sawyer.
That's why we do this together.
Maybe
Oh,
that's
you're
why
saying Ruth dropped the
maybe
ball.
that's why she got the Laura Ingalls Wilder Award, because Laura Ingalls Wilder's books often don't hang together cohesively as narratives either.
Well, okay, I just feel like I need to set the record straight about my reading preferences.
I'm sorry if
Because
I'm misrepresenting.
no, you're not. I'm just discovering this about myself. I have always said that I don't really love like episodic novels. But there are some episodic novels that I really love. And I think the difference is if you can give me the episodes and then show me how they all work together, then that's fine. If not, just write a short story.
I'm going to bring up some books that are very near and dear to your heart, but the Harry Potter books are extremely episodic, but then they all tie together.
Exactly. I was thinking that when I was reading this. That's another thing why I don't feel like I've ever... Well, I just don't love Narnia books as much as you. And some of the episodes, I don't really understand why, you know, like, I don't know, I just get bored with them.
Yeah.
So anyway.
You mean you don't like it when Santa Claus randomly shows up in The Lion, the Witch, and the
I
Wardrobe?
don't, and nobody likes that.
I like that Santa Claus shows
Okay.
up. Tolkien hated it, though, apparently.
I know, I'm learning all this from the Prophetic Imagination Station. Anyway, we digress.
Because there's not a lot to talk about with this book.
Do you give this book a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
A tepid thumbs up. If a wind blew a little too strongly, it might knock down this thumbs up.
Well, the wind's already blown over here. This is the first time, dear listeners, that we disagree. I give this book a thumbs down. Did you ever think that when we disagreed it would be me that was giving it a thumbs down and not you?
Yes.
I never thought
there
that
are all
would
sorts
happen.
of books that I think I will like and you will not.
But
We've just not hit them yet.
I don't know. Usually,
just wait until the high fantasy novels that hit in the 60s and 70s.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, I would have thought you would have gone negative first.
I'm not like overly positive on this. There was nothing that was so bad. I just like vaguely enjoyed it. It was like lightly pleasant, except for a few of the things that I've already said. I will never reread this book on purpose. I will not recommend this book to other people, but
you can appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, my thumb is quivering.
Okay, let me just give one last petty thing.
Go ahead.
So you know how you probably did not pay attention to this because it's so inconsequential. But throughout the book, they talk about she's got this like really cropped haircut. And like in the pictures,
No.
it looks like a boy's haircut.
No.
Look at this cover. Does it look like she's got cropped hair?
I can't tell because she's wearing a hat.
But look, it's like goes down to her shoulders. So anyway, I don't know who the illustrator was.
This is not like a Lois Lensky situation
But
where she
whoever
illustrated
did the
her own
front
novels.
and whoever did the inside should have communicated. That's all I got to say.
A lot of times the books get republished with new covers without consultation.
That's true.
Books
But they should have read the book then.
They should have.
Who did?
They should have. Here, hand that book to me and we'll shout out. We'll cancel whoever did this illustration. Rebecca, jacket illustration, copyright 1995.
Oh.
Ronald, his name is Himmler.
Okay.
Now we're really going to cancel him.
All right.
Isn't that a Nazi name?
I don't know.
Himmler?
Listen, we need to end the podcast, then you can find that out. Do you want to announce our next
It's not spelled
book?
the same as Heinrich Himmler.
Okay.
A leading member of the Nazi Party of
Like
Germany.
I said, this was very inconsequential, but
I think it's important to know that the guy who messed up the cover also shares a name, a misspelled Nazi name.
all right,
Cancel him.
let's do it. Announce our next book, please.
Okay. So that was the 1930s. Lackluster, but mildly pleasant according to me. Next time we're reading a book that I have read before, and I am predicting that we are again going to be split on it.
Okay.
Which is the 1948 Newbery Medal winner, The 21 Balloons by a guy whose name is French, and I'm going to try to pronounce it.
You say Dubois.
The next one, William Penne Dubois? Penn Dubois? Dubois. Not the famous W.E.B. Du Bois, though. It's the W.P. Du Bois. At any rate, the 21 Balloons. I remember liking this book. I haven't read it in probably 20 years, but we'll see. Also, just want to remind everyone, you can email us at newberrychronicles@gmail.com so we can get this cancel Heinrich Himmler. No, sorry, Ronald. His name is Ronald.
You said Heinrich. You need to go to bed.
His name is Ronald. #cancel Ronald Himmler. Email us for the details. Good night, everyone.
Thanks for listening.